Hi students,
Welcome to lesson number 31.
Social Stratification, Class, Concept, Characteristics and Functions. Let's introduce the subject. Communities are socially stratified in various ways. The sex division is always of major sociological significance, and age plays an important role in the hierarchical arrangement of primitive societies. The principal type of social stratification, especially in the more developed civilizations, is based on the phenomenon of class. Social classes are more or less spontaneous formations expressive of social attitudes. According to 𝗪𝗏, the class system emanates from and influences the whole mode of life and thought of the community. Let us look into the objectives. 1. To know the meaning of social stratification and class. 2. To define the social class. 3. To explain the perspectives on class system. 4. Explain the meaning of life chances and lifestyles. Let us talk about social stratification and class system. The functional theory of stratification maintains that stratification in the broad sense is not only universally present, but that it performs a definite social function. Stratification in societies in the future will be inconsequential. The economic aspect or dimension of stratification is important in all societies and manifestly so in modern societies. But we see how complex the problem is as soon as we try to specify the nature of the economic dimension, for it may refer to either wealth or income or occupation, which although closely related are not one and the same. Wealth and income are relatively easy to measure, but since their distribution is continuous, there is no easy way to draw lines between people on the basis of how much of the one or the other they have. Moreover, what matters is not simply how much wealth or income people have, but also how it is acquired and how it is used. In the past societies, wealth in some forms such as land was valued more than wealth in other forms such as money, and inherited wealth more than wealth acquired by trade or commerce. Capitalism reduces the significance of such distinctions, but does not eliminate them together, and while the accumulation and transmission of wealth might be severely restricted in socialist societies, disparities of income are important, whereas man's adult life is spent in the pursuit of his occupation in a factory or an office, and his early life is largely a preparation for it. The occupational structure itself becomes more differentiated and more complex. While all occupations may be equally useful, they are not all equally esteemed by members of society. Occupations are differentially esteemed because they are unequally paid. The ranking of occupations is in fact a very complex phenomenon, being governed partly by considerations of scarcity and partly by the values distinctive to the society concerned. In all modern societies, occupational ranking is complicated by the variability of values among sections of the same society and by the rapid replacement of old occupations. Occupation is closely linked with education in all industrial societies, but probably more so in socialist than in capitalist ones. Education is valued because it provides access to well paid occupations. Education, occupation and income enter as important ingredients in the styles of life adopted by men and women. Social stratification manifests itself typically through differences in styles of life among members of the same society. Such differences relate to both the material and the non-material sides of life and may manifest themselves in gross or subtle ways. Habitation, dress and food all indicate differences in styles of life. Groups differentiated by their styles of life, particularly when they are ranked among themselves, are generally referred to as status groups. Popular usage does not distinguish systematically between classes and status groups, but it is useful to do so. According to a famous distinction, a class is defined by its pattern of consumption. Definition and meaning of class system. Class is a status group. Max Weber's phraseology. A status group is a collection of persons who share a distinctive style of life and a certain consciousness of kind. A social class is a category of people who have similar socio-economic status in relation to other segments of the community or society. A class is conceived of as being a somewhat larger aggregate than a status group, and classes acquire their identity in opposition to each other in the political arena, whereas the relations between classes are typically relations of conflict. The relations between status groups are relations of emulation. Emulation by inferiors of the styles of life of their superiors provides stability to the prevailing system of stratification. A class is a form of social stratification in which allocation to, membership of and relationships between classes are governed by economic considerations rather than law or religion and ritual pollution. Since the beginning of industrial revolution in the 18th century, sociologists have generally used class in connection with the emergence of development and supersession of what is called as capitalist or industrial society. There are two basic uses of class within sociology. Both have in common a view of classes as hierarchically arranged economic groupings in an overall system, in that classes are not single entities, but are defined in relation to each other. One, classes as formation playing an actual role in developments in society and history, whose existence is more or less perfectly understood by the individuals or households who compose them. This involves a degree of class consciousness, class action and class conflict. 2. Classes as categories are called as socio-economic classes or groups, or loosely referred to as social classes, and aggregated into scales of one or many dimensions which are said to represent the class hierarchy. McIver defines class as a portion of community marked off from the rest of by social status. According to McIver, class is a status group. Class as a status group has a particular position in a hierarchy of ascent and descent, and the status groups can be called social classes. It is the sense of status sustained by the economic, political or ecclesiastical power and by the distinctive modes of life and cultural expressions corresponding to them that draws class apart from class, gives cohesion to each class and stratifies a whole society. According to Ogburn and Nimkoff, a social class is the aggregate of persons having essentially the same social status in a given society. According to Ginsberg, a class is a group of individuals who through common descent, similarity of occupation, wealth and education have come to have a similar mode of life, a similar stock of those ideas, feelings and attitudes and forms of behavior, and who on any or all of these grounds meet one another on equal terms as belonging to one group. Let us look into Karl Marx's definition of class. According to Karl Marx, there is hardly any society without social classes, and property ownership is a crucial variable which distinguishes the upper classes from the lower ones. By virtue of its ownership of property, means of production, the upper class dominates the propertyless class, the workers. A social class constitutes those persons who share the same function in a society's organization of production. For example, landlords are the owners of agricultural land, and the agricultural workers do not own any property. They earn daily bread by working for the landlord. Similarly, industries are owned by the capitalist and they employ workers to carry on the production of goods. Marx's explanation of class structure. It is an economic in nature because they come into existence in the process of satisfying basic necessities of life such as food, shelter and clothing. To satisfy his material needs, man has to work, and in this process he comes in contact with other fellow men. This contact sometimes gives rise to cooperation and certain other times to conflict. All those who perform the same function in the production process constitute a social class. For instance, those who own the means of production called the bourgeois. As a consequence, they tend to have different lifestyles with regard to consumption, habits, attitudes, etc. According to Marx, the relationship between the different classes is based on conflict. From this viewpoint, the history of all hitherto existing societies has been the history of class struggle. It is true that different individuals in a given class are in constant competition with each other, but what is of importance here is different classes are in struggle with one another. For instance, the lower classes are in constant conflict with the owners of means of production. This conflict is over economic matters. Workers demand better wages, which the owners of means of production are not prepared to concede. Let us look into Weber's definition of class. Weber's view of class is not basically different from that of Marx. A person's economic position constitutes the basis for inclusion or exclusion from a particular social class. According to Weber, members of a class share the same life chances with respect to supply of goods, external living conditions and personal life experience, insofar as this chance is determined by the amount and kind of power or lack of such to dispose of goods or skill for the sake of income in a given economic order. The difference between them is that Weber recognizes three dimensions of stratification: class, status and power, which is not the case of Marx. The relative position of class in the social scale arises from the degree of prestige attached to the status. Thus, the prestige enjoyed by the ruling classes in every society is superior to that of the domestic servants. The prestige which a class enjoys and the status derived from it depend on our evaluations, whereby certain qualities are considered to be more or less valuable according to the scale of values prevalent in society. In most of the society's knowledge, purity of race or descent, religion, wealth, bravery and other qualities confer a high degree of prestige on the persons possessing them and facilitate their admission to higher strata of society. A strata, especially a higher class, is distinguished from others by certain institutionalized relationships and customary modes of behaviors which are expected and demanded from its members by society at large. These ways include the mode of speech orders, the fashionable apartment in which one lives, the type of conveyance one uses, the friend circle, one's way of expenditure, etc. If the members break these conventions, the society resents that breach. The members of the subordinate groups also resent interference with their own by those of a superior class. Class structure during the Middle Ages. The ways in which the class system originated vary from society to society. Modern class structure is a development of one that prevailed during the Middle Ages. At the top of the class structure of the Middle Ages were the feudal lords or landed gentry, and at the bottom the serfs. Between these two classes there was another more complex one made by of household, servants, soldiers and above all artisans, together with the small tradesmen who gradually became more powerful in towns. These towns were free from lords and kings. The townsmen organized themselves into guilds on which the economic and social structure of the society was dependent for centuries during the Middle Ages. Above the guildmen there were the lawyers, doctors and financiers who were mostly Jew. These Jews constituted the highest class in the town. This continued till the 18th century, and then came the landed mobility that were later superseded by the mobility of wealth or rich industrialism. The direct descendants of the town workers and artisans were the bourgeois of the 18th and 19th centuries. They fought for their political rights in continental Europe, and they became more popular after the French Revolution in 1790. Let us look into class structure as a result of the Industrial Revolution. In England too, they gained popularity through a series of parliamentary reforms and other measures. At this movement came a powerful movement, the Industrial Revolution. As a result of this Industrial Revolution, two new social classes known as capitalist and the proletariat, or the working class or the laborers, came into existence. The capitalist had vast economic resources at their disposal, and he also had political power in their hands. The industrial workers neither had wealth nor economic power. They had no voice in the management of enterprise. They were deprived of any possibility of controlling or having say in the product of their own labor. They could only dispose of their own too strong, capable and masterful ants. They were doomed to remain always as the proletariat. The new capitalist class was more individualistic and less cohesive than the ancient aristocracy. Between these two classes, another new social class called the middle class comes into being. It was composed of technicians of all descriptions, engineers, doctors, architects, researchmen, scholars, teachers, persons administrative or clerical post, press personnel, a large section of white collar workers and other professionals. In terms of income and standard of living, this class is again subdivided into three categories: the upper class, the middle class and the lower class. In the development of social and political institutions and in the progress of arts and sciences, the middle class took a great interest, but with rapid industrialization and with the emergence of modern democratic and totalitarian systems, the power of the upper classes vastly increased. Today, the economic factor has become more influential in determining a family's class status. It is a primary force in social mobility, owing to which the class structure of society has become more open and mobile than before. The class which has undergone striking changes since the Industrial Revolution is working class. Through the improvement of its economic position and those social reforms, many changes have been brought in. Their standard of living has been improved considerably. Educational, health and welfare facilities have been extended to them. Even in the field of politics, they are given greater opportunities. Thus, a social class is any portion of community marked off from the rest on the basis of social status. Social classes are broad groups of individuals between whom there are barriers of social intercourse, especially in relations of intimacy. In all social systems, there are some movement of individuals or social mobility up and down in the social ladder. This mobility is known as the vertical mobility. One can move up and down the social ladder. Hence, we call the class system an open system of stratification. In this type of society, social mobility is maximal. Social mobility has been facilitated by industrialization and urbanization. Let us study the characteristics of class. 1. Class is achieved. Membership of a class does not depend on hereditary factors. It depends on the worldly achievement of an individual. 2. Class is dynamic. It is a flexible system of social division. A child belongs to the class of his parents. However, in later life, his own attributes, which are mostly the results of his worldly achievements, determine the status and class of an individual. He may climb to a higher class, he may slip into a lower one, or he may remain stationary in the same class in which he was born. 3. Class is flexible in many ways. Restrictions are not imposed in marriage in this system. A wealthy person generally prefers to marry a wealthy family, but he, without being outgrouped from a wealthy class, can marry a poor partner. There are no restrictions on the conduct of its individual members. 4. Class occupations are optional. It is the class system that, depending upon one's capabilities, interest and eligibility, allows its members to adopt the occupation of their liking. 5. Class is secular. No religion is basically required for the class system itself. There is no restriction for the choice of any religion by individual members, or a member is free to discard the religion at all. 6. Relative prestige. In the class system, despite the feeling of superiority and inferiority, there is no intensely relative order of prestige. People of different class may eat, drink and associate with each other. The money matter may come in the way, but there are no class orders to guide such associations. Personal attributes determine the class belonging of a person. Social class and life chances. Weber's concept of life chances refers to the opportunity to acquire the valued material and non-material reward of the society. For Weber's, the very essence of class was the unequal distribution of these life chances. The point here is that all people in a society do not have the same opportunity of securing them. The class system greatly affects the life chances of people. the members of given class have more or less the same life chances. That is, here exists the same probability of securing valuable things of life such as freedom, a high standard of living, leisure, etc. The influential people in a society can acquire several enjoyable goods of life. Poor people cannot acquire them. Life chances of different classes tend to vary between rich and the poor. For example, the chances of survival in the first year of life in case of a middle class infant are comparatively more than those in lower class families is greater. Availability of medical care has increased death rates. But in spite of all these measures, the chances of survival of infants in the first year of life are far more ahead in upper classes than in lower ones. Some of the children from lower classes, even when they survive owing to their sound physique, fail to be successful as adults because of their lower economic and social status when compared to others at upper class levels. There are marked differences in the incidence of various diseases among social classes. For example, lower classes are more prone to diseases like tuberculosis because they live in unhygienic conditions, pneumonia, pleurisy, bronchitis, etc. The upper classes are more prone to health problems like hypertension and certain cardiac disorders, blood pressures, diabetes, etc. Chances of social disorganization in the form of juvenile delinquency, truancy, destitution, etc. are more among the lower classes. The amount of happiness in relation to social class has been studied in several countries like USA, Russia, Italy, etc. These findings have shown a definite relationship between one's social class position and the amount of happiness drawn. Generally, people coming from higher classes as a rule prove to be more satisfied and happy when compared to those coming from lower classes. There are also class-wise variations with regard to access to higher education and availability of justice. Chances of a boy or girl going to college are affected by social classes. Children coming from upper classes naturally have maximum chances of receiving higher level of education. Among lower classes, there are several dropouts at the school level itself. In spite of several facilities provided by the government, dropout rates have not declined among lower classes. In the field of justice, lower classes suffer from certain handicaps. Rich person can secure the expert lawyers, expert witnesses, etc. And even if at last the person is found guilty, he may be simply fined and released. The same is not true of a man coming from the lower classes. Sometimes even an innocent person is punished and kept behind for no crime at all. Certain studies have reported a low but positive relationship between social status and the measured personality adjustment of children. Personality test performance of middle class children proved to be higher than that of lower class children. It is therefore proved that the middle class children are better adjusted. These results are based upon the fact that the early socialization in case of lower class children results in the internalization of lower class values. When they go out to schools, they find altogether a different surroundings with different set of values, namely middle class values, sometimes of their teachers. This confrontation with new value system results in a conflict of psychological nature when such children compare their family background with that of the middle class school atmosphere. Unfortunately, the process of adjustment with these alien values, children get maladjusted and suffer from several personality problems. They may result in truancy and their type of social disorganization. Social class and lifestyles. There are class-wise variations with respect to pursuit of leisure and forms of recreation, aesthetic, taste and references, ways of entertaining, religious differences, moral outlook and political values, patterns of family life, marital relations and child raising. The lower class people are so much involved in earning next day's food that they hardly think about fashions, education for their children, etc. Whereas, the upper classes have so money for expensive entertainment. Social classes are generally described in terms of their different styles of life. There can be different styles of life. For example, nobility was a style of life specific to one particular social class that level in leisure on the returns from its landed estates. Once the bourgeois amassed wealth, they also tend to retire from work, bought lands and led leisurely, noble style of life. The style of life of broad social classes is not much different from each other. In modern industrial societies, here people are expected to take the jobs and work hard. The class differences appear to be subtle, but there are still differences with regard to acquisition of status symbols that determine social class. Hence, differences utilized to assign class position to individuals. These differences are useful indicators for laymen as well as social scientists, and they utilize to assign class position to individuals. Social class and political ideology. An individual's class position tends to influence his political ideology in general and voting behavior in particular. Big business entrepreneurs tend to vote those political parties that encourage capitalistic tendencies, and lower classes consisting of mostly skilled, semi-skilled and unskilled workers tend to vote for parties that preach economic equality and classless society. Style of life of housewives. The lifestyle of housewives coming from different classes also varies. For example, low class housewives are always busy with their domestic work and hardly find any leisure for entertainment, recreation, etc. At the same time, they do not have any scientific knowledge regarding child rearing practices, etc. The position of the housewives among middle classes is also somewhat the same, except that they find some free time for recreation, reading, knitting, sewing, etc. Sometimes they are also working women who have to adjust themselves to the domestic as well as official fronts. The other category of typical upper class style of life of women, where they are generally members of several recreational or literary clubs, associations and organizations. They do not attach much importance to domestic work. They are the stats and the fashion conscious individuals. They are independent in their thinking and seek wider experience in different social activities. In the absence of any organized formal recreation and activities, lower classes tend to associate more with their kin. Other higher classes are generally members of different formal associations. Social classes and level of gratification. There is a definite relationship between lifestyle and the level of gratification, that is, the level of one's satisfaction. It is believed that lower classes stress more on the present and go for immediate gratification. There are fewer tendencies in lower class families to be willing to defer gratification. It is believed that the lower class wife shows greater interest in taking decisions pertaining to the household. The middle class and upper classes tend to somewhat for the future and are prepared to postpone some of their requirements. Thus, it may be said that learning to discipline the gratification is associated with socio-economic level of an individual. Occupational choice and style of life. The occupational choice is concerned the lower and middle classes prefer jobs that give more security. Sometimes they do not carry higher emoluments. They do not venture in to take vacations that involve risk, namely where a person may tend to occupy a job of higher economic status at one point of time and tend to lose the same certain other times. In order to avoid unpleasant situations, workers among lower classes prefer security of job over earnings. Lifestyle and status symbols. The material status symbols add to the lifestyle of classes. The upper class style of life emphasize a big house with more number of rooms, a big dining hall, a living room, separate rooms for children to play and study. Attention is given to decoration of the house with expensive paraphernalia such as expensive carved wood furniture and a number of decorative show pieces. On the other side, the lower classes who live in slums which sometimes do not possess minimum requirements of life. Style of life and reading habits. Reading habits also differ among different classes. For example, mostly entertainment middle and upper classes read literature that provides them entertainment as well as knowledge, scientific as well as general knowledge. Inheritance of class status. Class membership obtained once is socially inherited. Upper class position is often retained by families that once had wealth but are no wealthier. Upper class status does not require the continuous economic eminence. Social rank and prestige. The amount and kind of attention and receives is determined by one's rank and prestige within stratification system. The person with higher status tends to receive attention from the masses. People with inferior position tend to yield to the wishes, opinions or judgment of the superior people. Superior position gives an individual exaggerated notion of his importance. Inferior classes suffer from an exaggerated sense of self-abasement. Social class and power. Power and prestige are highly correlated. Power is significant because it means influence over the services of others and command over goods. The power is differentially distributed among social classes. In this lesson, we have studied about the class system. The social hierarchy, which is based primarily upon differences in monetary wealth and income, is called class system. The population of society is divided into three classes: upper class, middle class and lower class. The life chances depend upon the social class. The social classes are generally described in terms of their different styles of life. We also studied about the different categories of people.